Today we're exploring a whole new approach to TTRPGs that'll change the way you play D&D forever. So let's see who done it. Like I'm sure is true with most of you, I've played in more games of D&D than I can count. Just a quick glance over our streamed games on this channel reveals something like 200 individual sessions in the last 5 years alone. When I first got started with the hobby, I often wondered why I hadn't tried it sooner. I felt so free as a player to craft compelling stories, embody unique characters, and enjoy the company of good friends all at the same time. Of course, that's still true for me today, but I'm also constantly looking for new ways to make the various gameplay loops of D&D feel more fresh and exciting like they did when I was first starting. I've tried out some other systems and I think a lot can be said about going that route, but I also know a lot of players struggle to find groups for systems like Blades in the Dark, Call of Cthulhu, and all the rest. So, when I had the idea to run a classic murder mystery campaign on our channel, I decided that I wanted to add some homebrew to D&D rather than learn a whole new system. Little did I know this would ultimately become the engine for the most fun I've ever had playing TTRPGs. But first, what is a murder mystery in the context of D&D?
Good God, murder here.
Even if you haven't seen films like Murder on the Orient Express or the Clue movie, you can probably guess that at least one person is going to die under suspicious circumstances, leaving the rest of the characters to solve the crime before it's too late. Outside of the actual murder, there are several other key themes that must be present for this to work, requiring a different approach from both the DM and the players. These elements can be summed up as confines, clues, and conflicts. Yes, this time it's the 3 C's instead of the 3 G's from my video on world building that you can check out here. I didn't even have to make up a word for these, so that must mean they're all true, right? And all of these concepts can be taken and applied to other modes of play for even more immersive sessions. First, we'll cover one of the easiest to implement and the one that's the easiest to forget: confines. When running or playing a murder mystery, or really any short campaign or one-shot, it's important to understand the boundaries of the adventure. I'm not telling you to break out the train tracks and hop into a narrative minecart by any means, but the location of places, things, and people are going to be more important than ever as characters begin to investigate the untimely demise of whoever meets their end. The actual site for the adventure can be as big or as small as you'd like. A castle, a haunted house, or even an entire village. Regardless, DMs will want to thoroughly plot out key locations and events that occur over the course of the session without forcing players down a specific path. And players will want to remain receptive to any reasoning provided for staying within the bounds of this enriched sandbox experience. After all, most murder mystery stories have some element in place that keeps the characters on the scene and in danger of becoming yet another victim. This can be something as blunt as magically locked doors, or as eloquent as backstory motivations that compel characters to stay and investigate the crime.
I feel like a prisoner here.
I've also had lots of success with large weather events that prevent travel, a lockdown by the captain of the guard, and even a wrongful conviction of an NPC that the party is aligned with. But do also keep in mind that this type of narrative element can be useful even outside of a murder mystery, and that good players can help sell this illusion for the rest of the table too. That said, players shouldn't deprive themselves of creative ideas, and the DM shouldn't completely bar them from leaving if that is truly their goal. Maybe the murderer continues to track down anyone who leaves in order to tie up loose ends, and the story just happens somewhere else next time. I'll use our first murder mystery stream for examples throughout the video, but feel free to skip to the next timestamp if you want to avoid any spoilers. In that session, a strong storm rolled in off the coast and made it dangerous to go outside of the castle where the murder mystery took place. If they had decided to leave anyway, I'd planned to have them marked as persons of interest in the murder of a certain noble. As the story continued, they'd eventually be wrongfully accused for the crime and need to solve the murder in order to clear their own names. I'd also done some work with each of the characters' backstories to tie them to some of the NPCs in a way that made them feel connected to the events of the story. But for the most part, the boundaries I'd set up were hardly necessary as the narrative seemed to keep them plenty engaged. Although these confines did serve another important purpose that brings us to our next key element: clues. No mystery is complete without them, literally. And lots of run-of-the-mill D&D sessions can benefit from a few obvious hints as well when players start to lose the narrative thread of the adventure. I'm not just talking about physical evidence like fingerprints, time of death, and murder weapons either, even though these kinds of clues are classic murder mystery tropes that you should include in your rendition. What I find far more evocative and inspiring are the rumors that swirl at the scene of such a crime. As such, DMs should prepare a list of rumors involving each character that should be mostly true. Then have each player roll on a table at the start of the session for one or even several rumors that they may have heard about other characters. As they investigate, they can even uncover more details, so it's easy to have fun with these and watch their eyes light up when they uncover some juicy new secret.
You would also have heard another rumor.
Things not so good in the royal family.
My advice is for players to even work with the DM on rumors involving their own characters, but we'll get to more of that in just a second. The main thing to keep in mind is that you want these rumors to be mostly true, even if they're exaggerated a bit. A red herring is fun when it misdirects the party temporarily, but giving too much false information will just muddy the waters and make everyone confused. Trust me. And to that end, even if you aren't a DM that does voices or accents, I'd advise putting in some extra work to make sure that every NPC feels wholly unique with different mannerisms, characteristics, and species traits that help players differentiate between them.
I guess I can do that.
So maybe one of the player's characters heard that the young gnomish inventor owes the elven Madam Middybiddle a large sum of money. Perhaps in reality, the madam made an investment in the gnome's latest invention that simply has yet to pay off for her. It could be that a player heard a certain half-orc knight was disgraced after killing a valuable prisoner of war. That could be true, but doesn't mean that they would kill again after a very intense argument with another NPC.
Oh, don't worry about me. I learned my lesson. But, this guy though, he didn't subscribe.
These sorts of things do a great job of getting roleplay started at the table, and they can work exceptionally well at the start of any D&D adventure with new characters and plot lines that the players aren't familiar with yet. But this seldom becomes the center for an accusation as the mystery comes to a close. Instead, there's one more type of clue that I think reigns supreme over all the others, and I doubt it's what you might expect. While it may not play a large role in other sessions, this piece of evidence is absolutely vital in a murder mystery, and it goes a long way in making the adventure feel like more than just words on a page or improv from the DM. So when planning out my own murder mystery sessions, I take great care in plotting out the pathing of NPCs through whatever area it takes place in. I find it extremely helpful to have a black and white map printed out for the session that I can then draw on with colored markers that correspond to each NPC. Using this, I can note their movements during key moments in the narrative, and I've even included some of the maps that I've used in the description below, if you want to check those out. As the player characters move through their environment, the DM can describe certain NPCs passing through other corridors. Maybe they're moving quickly like they have somewhere to be, or perhaps they even seem a bit lost themselves. It could even be that they're nervous about being seen. Players will engage with these interactions and wield this information more tactfully than any other type of clue, and it gets even more fun when the DM throws a little magic in the mix with some disguised self shenanigans and various alibis for seemingly suspicious individuals. Now, this can get extremely overwhelming if you haven't done it before, and I probably wouldn't recommend using a tactic like this outside of a murder mystery, so here's how I handle it. First, think about what part of the adventure will be the most important to have mapped out. You definitely don't want to do this for the whole session. Is it at the start of the adventure when your players are getting a lay of the land? Probably not. Instead, I'd reserve this approach for the moments immediately leading up to and immediately after the murder takes place. The second thing that you'll want to keep in mind is that your players, as always, are unknown variables in this whole equation. There are ways to keep them from interfering with your plans. Yes, but you probably don't want to be too heavy-handed here. Something will almost certainly need to be adjusted on the fly in order to account for their meddling.
Blasted meddling kids.
Having a map drawn out for around the time of the murder will help you to handle this gracefully without scrambling to change too much too quickly. For example, if the murderer is fleeing the scene of the crime and all of the players and NPCs are standing around the sole exit, the murderer isn't going to come out that way. Instead, they might drop down from a high window and sprain their ankle in the fall. This could end up being a clue for the players later when one of the NPCs shows up with a new limp the next time they meet. But there is one other approach that can help to mitigate these kinds of improv issues for DMs, and that brings us to our third C, conflict.
Roll for initiative. But not really.
You might imagine conflict to translate directly into combat, but this is actually just one very small part of it in the context of a murder mystery. In this case, conflict is what moves the plot forward and drives motivation for every character, both players and NPCs. Some conflicts are simple. Character A doesn't like character B, or character C noticed a large sum of gold has been stolen from them. However, the version of this that carries the most weight in a murder mystery is what I like to call the lights out moment.
The only way to avoid finding yourselves on the front pages is for one of you to kill Wadsworth. Now.
This isn't something that has to be present every time, but it definitely helps to add intrigue to a session, and it goes a long way in making sure that certain events remain locked in place regardless of what the players do. What's more, because of the way this conflict is presented to them, the players shouldn't feel cheated out of their agency. To illustrate how this works, imagine a room of 10 people with a flickering candle at the center. Everyone is having a great old time until the candle goes out. When the candle is relit, only 9 people are left standing and one is, well, not standing.
Oh, but I have dark vision.
Try not to get too literal here. Really, what we're doing is providing a clear and uninterruptible chance for the murderer to strike, away from prying eyes. In our first murder mystery stream, this was done when a certain noble gave a drunken speech to an uncomfortable crowd of onlookers in an open courtyard. As the cringe capped out, the sky opened up and a torrential downpour began. Everyone was rushed inside to avoid getting soaked, while the drunken noble was retired to a private room where they could recover. It was in this room that the murder took place, and no one was allowed in during that time. Naturally, the players suspected something, but the narrative swept them away to the ballroom, as anyone seen sneaking near the room would undoubtedly become a main suspect. In our second session, the murder occurred while the characters were asleep, though some were able to gather a few clues from the confines of their own rooms. The actual murder is the center of the entire session around which everything else revolves. Every piece of evidence, every rumor, every step of every NPC is all based around this one circumstance. So shielding that event from too much interference is vital, at least until DMs have run a few of these and feel confident enough to improvise through it like I did in our third session. Stemming from this one central incident, DMs will also want to create proper motivations for each character to have committed the crime.
But why suspect me?
Because often these will involve the rumors that we mentioned earlier, but they don't always have to. More importantly, you may have missed something crucial in what I just said. So let me say it again. Create motivations for each character to have committed the crime. One of the final hallmarks of a murder mystery is that any character could have been the culprit. So why should the player characters be assumed innocent? I don't think that they should. And this is what brings it all together. When creating rumors and motivations for each NPC, DMs should take some time to do the same for each player character. They can coordinate with them if they feel it's necessary, but they should always be careful not to reveal how the actual murder takes place. And most importantly, make sure that every player knows at the start of the session that any one of them could be the murderer as well. So long as they understand this, they won't mind becoming the bad guy. In fact, some players will even feel excited at the prospect of playing that part. Any one of them can be the murderer.
I want it so bad.
So once this is properly conveyed, each player rolls a D100 at the same time they roll for rumors that they've heard at the start of the session. The DM takes each number rolled and compares it to a pre-designated range, and any player within that range becomes the murderer. If 2 or more players land in the range, whoever gets closest to the center of the range takes the roll. And if none of them land within the range, then none of them are the murderer. But the DM has one more ace up their sleeve with this bit of homebrew, because the DM can lie, and I have a confession to make. In our first murder mystery session, all of these homebrew ideas were pretty new to me and I hadn't been able to test them in an offline game. So at the start of the session, I had each player roll for what rumors they'd heard, and I had each of them roll to see if they were the murderer or not. I sent each of them secret text messages depending on their results that included the rumors, whether they were the murderer or not, and an explanation of how the murder would take place if they were indeed the murderer. But no one at the table got that explanation because it was actually impossible for any of them to be the murderer in that first session. It actually doesn't matter if the player characters are the murderers or not, because that's not what we're after here in the first place. What we really want the most out of our murder mystery D&D, and the biggest component to conflict here, is suspicion.
Yes, putting someone to bed is what you do when they've had too much to drink. If they've been poisoned, you don't want to leave them alone.
You two are really fast to assume he was poisoned.
At every turn, the players should suspect one another as well as every NPC, and call into question suspicious actions that could just as easily be those characters investigating the murder themselves. Then, when the mystery is finally solved and one final combat is underway, a sense of camaraderie falls over the party once again as all plot points align and the truth is revealed. In the game of D&D, it can be surprisingly rare to convey to a player the sense of true danger during a social encounter, the sense that they are truly on their own when the lights go out. And it's why I'd encourage you to try this for yourself at your own table. With this tension added, backstories are drawn out into the light, accusations are levied against allies, and no one takes the word of anyone else without just a hint of doubt. What I love most about mystery narratives is that they often leave you feeling more clever than the average bear, and that is the high that we're chasing here.
My name is
Constructed Chaos,
and I am probably the greatest detective in the world.
If you're looking for inspiration, check out our own murder mystery sessions on the channel here, and let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in a future publication of these mysteries as pre-made adventures for you to enjoy without all the extra work. But most importantly, go out there and make some chaos.